The Mechanicus. They are a different breed of fanatic. You can talk to a sister of battle about faith, or a guardsman about duty. But try to talk to a tech priest about hope, and they'll stare at you with their optic sensors and ask for the data slate containing the efficiency metrics of the concept. Kratos-7 was especially bad. The air tasted of ozone. The structures were mountains of chrome and iron. Everything moved with a predictable hydraulic hiss. Then the glitches started. It wasn't a sudden uprising. No chaos cults screaming heresy in the main square. It was a fault. A systemic failure in the logical process, beginning in the lower, unaugmented workers, the servitors who hadn't earned the blessings of metal, and the maintenance crews who still relied on the fragile weakness of human flesh. The initial reports were maddeningly vague. Unexpected cessation of output. Substandard logic processing detected. Biologic asset manifesting erratic nocturnal shutdown sequence. Translation. Workers were dying in their sleep or waking up screaming and immediately going catatonic. And not just a few. It started slow, 1 in 1,000, then 1 in 100. And the common factor? Nightmares. Which, for the average Imperial worker whose life is a waking nightmare already, is saying something. They were dreaming of a figure. A burned, sneering creature with a ragged hat and a filthy sweater. And claws. Not the noble, holy claws of a space marine, but crude, razor-sharp things grafted onto a leather glove. I was summoned by a high-ranking engine seer, a thing with more cable than torso, named Arch-Magos. He spoke in clipped, metallic bursts. He didn't see a threat. He saw a bug. Commissar, the Vox emitter crackled, your Cadian assets must isolate and terminate the vector of this illogical contagion. It defies our predictive analysis. It is an anomaly of the flesh. I looked at his vast, unblinking crimson lenses. Magos, I replied. This sounds like a psychic threat, possibly a minor demon of the warp. We require a sanctioned Imperial psyker to enter the dream state and confront the entity. Kalen's optic array narrowed. The sound it made was like dry ice scraping metal. Dreams. That is a biological flaw, Commissar, a weakness. Our analysis indicates a non-corporeal entity is exploiting unaugmented nervous systems. We must find the source and delete it from the local data stream. The sheer arrogance was breathtaking. They didn't even acknowledge the warp. To them, it was just inefficient code. But the body count climbed. The worst part was how localized it was. The augmented Mechanicus personnel, the Skitari legions, the high-caste tech priests, they were completely unaffected. Their dreams were not a canvas of fear, but a sequence of logical diagnostics and sacred arithmetic. They slept in controlled cycles, often hooked directly into machine spirits, their minds less a fragile psyche and more a hard drive running a constant defrag. The entity, whatever it was, simply had no purchase on a mind composed mostly of metal and cold, infallible logic. We finally got a clear image. A young sanitation servitor, scheduled for mind wipe and reprogramming, was still lucid enough to sketch the horror before his end. It was unmistakable. The striped sweater, the burn scars. This wasn't a demon of Tzeentch or a random warp spawn. This was a folk villain from a half-forgotten time, a monster of pure, distilled fear from the ancient past, somehow dragged into the 41st millennium. I knew enough from archaic Terran data files to recognize him. Freddy Krueger. A nightmare given form. And here he was, on a planet where nightmares were an inefficient waste of production time. I remember the Skitari Alpha, designated Row 79, leading the investigation. He didn't search for a man. He searched for a signal. They treated the nightmares like a broadcast, an unsanctioned data packet being inserted into the local network of fleshy minds. They tracked the location of the highest density of terminal cessation events. The deaths. It led them to a massive derelict factory complex in the deepest underbelly of Kratos-7, a place where even the Mechanicus had given up on maintenance, letting the rust and gloom claim it. It was, ironically, the closest thing the planet had to a haunted house. When we breached the derelict sector, there was a moment of silence. The heavy, oily air just hung there. Then we heard it. Not the screams of the dying, but something else. A high-pitched, almost feminine, frustrated laughter. It echoed off the vast steel walls, the sound of a predator completely out of its element. Row 79 and his Skitari paused, their rifle barrels dropping slightly. This wasn't the sound of an orc or a standard demon. It was something personal, something weak. Krueger, or the thing that looked like him, was finally cornered. He'd been feeding, preying on the few unaugmented minds left in that sector, but his meal was running thin. He tried to project fear. I felt it, a cold, oily dread creeping up my spine, a reminder of every mistake and failure I'd ever buried. The few unaugmented guardsmen with me stumbled, clutching their heads, their minds screaming at them to run. This was his turf. This was his power. But then I watched as he turned his attention to the Skitari. He floated towards them, his razor glove scraping against a rusted pipe to make a horrible grating sound. He sneered, the fire behind his eyes trying to ignite the latent fear in their metallic forms. "Come to Freddy," the voice hissed, amplified by some psychic trick. "I know your secrets. I know what you truly fear." And the Skitari, they just stopped. Their optic sensors blinked once, twice. Row 79 lifted his galvanic rifle, not in panic, but with the cool, calculated speed of a logic gate closing. There was no fear in their posture, no hesitation. They had been augmented for generations to feel only loyalty to the Omnissiah and the logical imperative of their duty. Their minds were shielded not by faith, but by cold, hard-wired programming. They didn't have a subconscious the way a normal human did. They had a central processor and a constant link to the Mechanicus datasphere. I heard the Arch-Magos Kalen's Vox channel, which was piped through my helmet, suddenly spike with urgency. Entity is attempting unsanctioned data insertion into Bionics Unit Alpha 79, threat level, non-applicable. Reclassify entity as network virus, non-logical origin. The shift in terminology was everything. He wasn't a monster. He was malware. Krueger, confused, launched a phantom attack. He tried to manifest a memory of a childhood trauma or a moment of weakness inside Row 79's visual field. But Row 79 wasn't seeing a ghost. His mind was displaying an error log. Error, his Vox crackled, devoid of emotion. Memory not found, requesting logical imperative from Arch-Magos. The confusion on Krueger's scarred face was the purest form of terror I've ever seen. His power, his very existence, was dependent on the illogical, the emotional, the human weakness of fear. And these things, these partially human engines of war, had none of it. The tech priests didn't send in a team of elite Terminators. They sent in a command. Kalen's voice boomed across the entire sector, not a warning, but a system instruction. Execute protocol, logic cleansing. The Skitari raised their rifles. Krueger screamed, a sound of utter existential panic. He tried to dive into the nearest human mind, one of my guardsmen, but Row 79 was faster. The Skitari didn't shoot to kill, they shot to disintegrate. Their galvanic rifles unleashed bursts of arcane energy, not aimed at his body, but at the space around his body, saturating the local psychic field. They weren't fighting a man. They were suppressing an electronic signature. It was like watching a ghost get DDoSed. Krueger's form began to flicker, his edges blurring, the familiar hat and sweater dissolving into static. His final moment was truly pathetic. He collapsed onto the oily floor, his razor glove uselessly clawing at the thick, unfeeling plating of a Skitarius's boot. He wasn't screaming about children or nightmares anymore. He was just whimpering, a raw, terrified sound. I can't feel them. I can't reach them. He was a shark drowning in a pool of fresh water, utterly powerless. Then the Skitari opened fire with a synchronized burst of focused energy. Not with rage, not with fear, but with precision. The air where he stood shimmered, turned a brief, toxic green, and then nothing. He was gone. Arch-Magos, Kalen's Vox chimed one last time. Logical contagion eliminated, data anomaly deleted, resume production protocols. Commissar, your guardsmen may now be returned to watch duties. The problem was, as suspected, a failure of inadequate augmentation. He never even bothered to thank us. For the Adeptus Mechanicus, the whole affair was just a footnote on a long list of system maintenance. But for me, I saw a terror that had haunted 1,000 worlds, rendered utterly impotent, not by faith or courage, but by the cold, beautiful, and utterly inhuman refusal to feel. In the 41st millennium, the truest defense against a nightmare is to simply become less human. Now, pour me another. The oil on that planet still tastes better than this synth ale.